So what I want to do is I want to start this with the puzzle that brought me to this topic, because it's not really related to other things that I research on. So sometimes I participate in demonstrations with PETA. Sometimes they're sexual demonstrations and I'm naked. Sometimes I'm wearing a fish costume. That is not a sexy fish costume. And this started because I was at a demonstration once in Boston. And what happens is a call goes out to people who said that they'd be interested in demonstrations, saying, we're going to be here, this is the type of demonstration, if you're interested, call us. One of the people who responded was a young woman of color who said that she'd never done a demonstration before or anything with PETA, but really cared about animal rights. She mostly worked within feminism and was going to school for women's studies, and that she wanted to take part. And so what we did in this one was we were painted, so we were not wearing tops and had under on, and were painted to look like different animals. And we held signs that said, whose skin are you in? And prints, not skins. And it happened during Fashion Week outside of fashion shows that had her. And she had just had a child and had to wait to have her breast painted last with paint because she was pumping milk for her child so that the baby could have it during the demonstration. After the demonstration, we went out to lunch afterwards and we talked. And she talked about how she felt like was one of the most empowering things that she'd done, and showing off her new post-body, baby body in this way felt amazing, and she felt like so much more secure in it, and that these hesitations she had about being sexual with her body as a new mother, she felt like had felt different after being naked in public for a political cause. And then we started talking about how people say that demonstrations in PETA are sexist. And for me, there was this giant problem and disconnect because I consider myself a feminist, and I was just naked for PETA. And here's a young woman of color, new mother, who says that this felt like one of the most empowering things she'd ever done, and is getting a degree in women's studies, that there's some kind of problem here with saying that this act is a sexist act when you have people who are doing the act who identify as feminists feeling like it's consistent with their feminism. And that's where I started, and that's where I'm going with this. So what I first want to talk about is ways in which, so I'm really influenced by pro-sex feminism. And I'm really influenced by Wendy McElroy, who in developing her theories went and talked to hundreds of sex workers. So what I did, and I'm in the process of doing, is talking to as many people as I can who do these demonstrations, men and women, and to people who don't identify as men or women, to see what their personal experiences are of being. So what I want to do first is I want to talk based upon their views from these interviews and interviews with Imogen Newkirk and essays she's published about ways in which their work for PETA can be seen as feminist, and how these demonstrations, instead of being sexist, can work with PETA's feminist practice and goals that I'm going to identify. And I basically am going to argue that the really controversial nature of whether PETA is sexist or not goes to the division in feminism about sexuality and sex work, I think is very alive and very intense and gets replicated when we talk about PETA. So what I'm not trying to say here is that PETA is perfect. What I'm not trying to say is that none of this is sexist. What I'm trying to say is that before PETA is dismissed immediately as sexist, I think we need to talk to the people who are doing these acts that we are calling sexist and seeing how it can work with them within their views of feminism. So getting into this, and as just a few baseline facts, I'm talking about the advertisements that PETA runs and public demonstrations. So if you look at the screen, this is the Google image search results if you Google image search PETA. I didn't do any filters, nothing else. This is what comes up. I want to notice a few things about this before we start talking, because I think that the work of men in PETA in sexual and non-sexual ways gets erased and doesn't get acknowledged. If you look, 3 of the first 4 results are men. 1 of them is sexual or sexualized. 2 of them are not. On the same first row, you have an older man. And if you look through this, you also see, significantly more racial diversity than I see in this room. And so when we're talking about these things, I want to keep in mind that this is not white women of a certain type that are in the PETA ads or images, including the ones that are really, really popular. The two most looked at images are men. So I want to start with that. And here's an example of two ads. These are the top two hits that are currently the most posted on the internet PETA advertisements. So getting into this, one of the first things I wanted to do was set up the way that current animal studies has talked about intersectionality and feminism, but I think that's been talked about a lot at this conference. There's been a lot of panels on intersectionality, and I think that we can understand these concerns and we can go into them more in question and answer, but I don't want to spend time repeating what I feel like has really been said well. So what I want to do, though, is look and see at the people who are doing these ads for PETA and Ingrid Newkirk to see if what PETA is talking about are these same kinds of concerns. And I think that you do see the same concerns of breaking down binaries, of showing the constructed and fluid nature of a lot of things, whether it's man and woman or animal versus human. So to get to just this brief bit of data, there's an essay by Ingrid Newkirk in Lisa Kemmer's volume, Sister Species, and Newkirk says that she identifies as a feminist, and she says that she wants to refuse the differentiation between women and men. She says she hates being identified as a woman, and she thinks that compartmentalization, be it as woman or man, human or animal, is, in her words, the root of all evil, having contributed enormously to discrimination. She ties similarities between the taming of girls and animals, the taming and grooming of girls and animals from the 18th century to present times. She talks about nationalism and how we identify ourselves in exclusive ways, whether it be American or human. She finds issue with the term woman, as she thinks it's tied exclusively to sex and reproductive organs, which she thinks has led to the female human and non-humans being seen as baby incubators, the carriers of men's seeds, not equals but vessels, defined by our sexual organs. She points out that almost everyone she works for is female because the vast majority of all factory farm animals in the world are women. And she states that the central goal in her advocacy is that we reject all classifications as much as we possibly can and demand to be part of something bigger, members of the community of all living beings. So what I'm going to argue here is that the founder of PETA is talking about PETA being a feminist organization with similar concerns that people who work in animal rights and feminism espouse and are talking about. And similar things came up in my interviews. Almost everyone I interviewed identified as a feminist without me asking if they identify as a feminist. This was things volunteered. One person said that many people said that they became involved in animal advocacy after becoming involved with feminism, and that was definitely the case with me. I consider myself really involved with feminism, and it was reading Carol Adams and the ways in which animals are exploited by gender that led me to become a vegan. And other things, people I talk to, people who are participating in these demonstrations, about how some of the worst exploitation happens to female animals because of their reproductive systems. And another person said that I think as feminists, we should be redefining, reclaiming, empowering motherhood. Other people called for the rejection of differentiation, not just between women and men, but also humans and animals, with one person I interviewed stating that a big part of what we're trying to do is realize that even though we might not be exactly the same animals, we are the same in the ways that matter. So I just want to say that as a sort of baseline manner, the type of feminist organization that PETA can be seen, at least by Ingrid Newkirk and people in these demonstrations, I think are really related to boundary work, to challenging these, to talking about fluidity, and other pragmatic and strategic feminist concerns. And what I want to further argue now is that these concerns, instead of being undermined by the sexual ads and the sexual demonstration, that the